All right, so what's going on in Detroit? In Detroit, over 100,000 families have lost their homes. That is, since the Great Recession, 1 in 3 homes has been taken by the government for property tax foreclosure. We on the ground are calling this a hurricane without water because of the extensive amount of displacement and dispossession. I want you to see what that looks like. When I say 1 in 3 homes in Detroit have been taken through property tax foreclosure, each of these red dots is a home. And as you can see here, there is no neighborhood in Detroit that has not been touched by this property tax foreclosure crisis. So the real question is, what in the world is going on in Detroit, where they have so many property tax foreclosures? Well, a large part of the story has to do with after the Great Recession, housing prices plummeted nationally. But they took a precipitous dive in Detroit, as you can see here, and they don't recover. And this is the very same time Detroit is going through the largest municipal bankruptcy in US history. And so the government doesn't have capacity to lower property tax values to match the new drastically lower values. So that's a part of the story. But let me just make sure you guys are following me to know how a property tax bill is calculated in Michigan. It's the taxable value minus qualifying exemptions, which are usually for seniors, veterans, poverty tax exemption, times the property tax rate. That's what you pay. Now, the property tax rate in Detroit is one of the highest anywhere. But what I want to focus on is not the property tax rate, but something we call the assessed value. Now, the Michigan State Constitution supporting legislation and case law is quite clear. No property can be assessed at more than 50% of its market value. What does that mean? If your house, the market value of your house is $100,000, the local authorities cannot assess your home for more than $50,000. And if they assess it for more than $50,000, then that is illegal. So the other state constitutions and legislation, to the extent they mention property tax assessments at all, say things like it has to be fair, uniform, equal, which are all nebulous standards up to a judge to determine. Because Michigan has a ratio, my team and I could come in and run the numbers to determine legality, and that is precisely what we did. Our findings were shocking. We found that between 2009 and 2015, anywhere from 55 to 85% of properties were being assessed in violation of the Michigan State Constitution. My God. Then we wanted to know, well, which properties are being overassessed? And so we broke the data up into what we call 5 quintiles. Quintile 1 is the lowest valued homes, while quintile 5 is the highest valued homes. And we found that in quintile 1 and 2, meaning for the lowest valued homes, 95% or more were being illegally assessed. But when you got to quintile 5 for the highest valued homes, only about 16% were being overassessed. What does that tell us? That tells us that this burden of unconstitutional tax assessments is falling on the homeowners who are least able to bear it, the poorest of the poor, the most vulnerable homeowners. So many of you know that Detroit was taken over by an emergency manager during the bankruptcy. But what many people don't know is the state also took over Detroit's assessment division because of these rampant illegal assessments that I'm talking about. And the city of Detroit only got back control of its assessment division in 2017 once they completed a parcel by parcel reassessment of each and every residential property. And so the University of Chicago's Center for Municipal Finance redid the study to figure out, well, did things get better? And their study shows that in the middle, things got better. But for the lowest valued homes, the reassessment didn't help. To this day, the over 90%, as you can see here, since 2013 all the way to 2019, the vast majority of the lowest valued homes are still being overvalued. That's another way to say they're still being illegally assessed and subjected to illegally inflated property taxes. So again, this gives you an example of what's going on. The lowest valued homes are overtaxed, while the highest valued homes are undertaxed. And this has led to two consequences. The first is that Detroiters are overpaying. A wonderful expose by the Detroit News has put a number on it, and they have shown us that between 2010 and 2016, Detroiters were overtaxed by $600 million. The second consequence of these rampant illegal assessments is foreclosures. Again, Detroit has more foreclosures than we've seen in US history since the Great Depression. So my co-author and I did a study, and we wanted to figure out what percent of foreclosures would not have happened but for these illegally inflated property tax assessments. Because there's lots of reasons people go into tax foreclosure. You might have got, poverty, divorce, a health bill, the list goes on and on. So the challenge in this paper was to hold all those factors constant so we could measure the effect of illegally inflated assessments. And with the most conservative estimates, we're able to say that 10% of all tax foreclosures would not have happened but for these illegally inflated property tax assessments. And when you look at that bottom quintile, those lowest valued homes that are still to this day being overassessed, we're able to say 1 in 4 or 25% of those homes would not have gone into tax foreclosure but for these illegally inflated property tax assessments. So where does that leave us? Well, we have a situation in Detroit where unconstitutional property tax assessments are rampant. They lead to illegally inflated property taxes that Detroiters cannot afford to pay, which has led to foreclosure rates we haven't seen since the Great Depression. And the final step of this equation that I haven't talked about is it was all for property taxes that the majority of Detroiters should not have been paying in the first place. Why? Because 40% of Detroiters live below the poverty line. And if you live below the poverty line, you qualify for the poverty tax exemption. But the city of Detroit made this exemption so difficult to access that people could not access this entitlement. Through a groundswell and activism and communities coming together to fight back, we have managed to make the property tax exemption, the poverty tax exemption, more accessible in Detroit. But the point is, Detroit is not alone in this problem. Inflated property taxes are also a problem in Wayne County. Now, Wayne County is extremely segregated. There are 43 municipalities in Wayne County. 3 have a supermajority or 70% or more African American. That's Detroit, Inkster, and Highland Park. And 33 have a population that's 70% or more white. It's horrible that Blacks and whites do not live together in Wayne County. But it allows me to say, well, are the Blacks and white cities being treated differently? And I'm able to say that the Black cities in Wayne County are being subjected to these tax foreclosures at a far greater rate than the majority white cities. I'm also able to say that in these supermajority white cities where the population is 70% or more white, 91% of these municipalities are actually correctly assessing properties. They're correctly valuing properties. They're doing what they're supposed to be doing. But of the supermajority Black cities, Detroit, Inkster, and Highland Park, not one of them is doing what they're supposed to do. Each and every one of those cities has been subjected to these illegally inflated property taxes systemically. So we're dealing with the system here of racialized property tax administration. And this problem of racialized property tax administration is not just a Detroit problem. It's not just a Wayne County problem. It's actually a national problem. There was an amazing study done by Professors Afanasio Leon and Professor Howard. It was a national study that shows that Black and brown homeowners pay, on average, a 10 to 13% higher tax rate than whites. That comes out to about $300 to $400 more than whites annually. And all of this is contributing to the racial wealth divide. Now, the biggest offenders in terms of overvaluing, here is a study done by, again, University of Chicago Center for Municipal Finance. And they found of the states that overvalue properties, the two biggest offenders are Alabama and Michigan. But you can see there are other states as well that are big offenders. So the point is, we're not taking this lying down. The data is clear, and we are starting this movement to end racialized property tax administration right here in Detroit. The Coalition for Property Tax Justice is a coalition of about a dozen grassroots organizations committed to stopping this racialized property tax administration in Detroit. And the coalition has three primary demands. The first is of Mayor Duggan. It's to create a fund to compensate Detroiters who the city has overcharged. Because you can't just overcharge people talking about some oops, I'm sorry. No, there's no oops, I'm sorry. Compensation is required. And Mayor Duggan must create a fund to start raising money for this compensation. The second demand is for Eric Sabree, the Wayne County Treasurer. You all wouldn't believe me when I say that despite this clear and unequivocal empirical evidence of these illegally inflated property taxes, the county is still busy foreclosing on homes. And what we're saying is right now they've stopped foreclosing on homes because of COVID-19, but once COVID clears up, they will continue foreclosing on homes. And you can't just, a home is important. A home is not just bricks and mortar. A home is a family's memories, a family's legacy. It's how we pass down intergenerational wealth. So if any government is going to take a family's home because they failed to pay property taxes, well, they sure as heck better make sure that those property taxes were properly calculated. And so we're calling on Eric Sabree to stop foreclosing on owner-occupied homes until we can ensure that these overinflated property taxes have stopped in Detroit. The third and final goal is for Governor Whitmer, which is why we are all here. We're calling on Governor Whitmer to order the State Tax Commission to do its job and investigate and end these illegally inflated property tax assessments in Detroit. We met with the State Tax Commission. The Center for Municipal Finance flew in from Chicago. Councilwoman Mary Sheffield came and brought all the parties together, showed the State Tax Commission the data from the University of Chicago Center for Municipal Finance, and the State Tax Commission refused to investigate. They even refused to look at his study, to evaluate his study. So then we called Governor Whitmer and said, can you being the executive of Michigan, can you force the State Tax Commission to do its job? And she is also refusing. And this just boils my blood, because the point is the data is so clear. There is a problem. And this, this democratically elected governor, Governor Whitmer, is refusing to do something about it. But guess what? It was Black people in Detroit that delivered Michigan. It was Black people in Philadelphia that delivered Pennsylvania. It was Black people in Milwaukee who delivered Wisconsin. It was Black people in Atlanta who delivered Georgia. So when we have a problem that's disproportionately affecting Black people, the Democrats should be the first in line to solve the problem instead of refusing to evaluate data, refusing to look at the empirical evidence. And so that's why we are all gathered here today, to put pressure on Governor Whitmer to do the right thing. Thank you. I'll send it back to you, Orlando.